From Wacko Chaco Studio, I am Ashwin Chaco, and this is The Fruitful Life, a show about the business of creativity and the stories behind the creators that have made their dreams a reality. Hey folks, welcome to The Fruitful Life. Benji Davies.
Hello, how you doing?
Good. Thanks so much for taking the time to join our show.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, so for our audience that might not know you, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name's Benji Davies. I'm an author and illustrator of children's books, so I write and illustrate them. My probably best known books are The Storm Whale and Grandad's Island. But I also I've illustrated lots of things for other authors. I also illustrate a board book series called Busy Bear. And yeah, I'm currently working on some older fiction work as well. So yeah, so it started off in illustration and then have sort of expanded into writing, really.
Nice. Well, I'm looking forward to getting into that. But before we do, the first question I like to ask is if you could be a fruit, what fruit would it be and why? The
Now,
question that you've been daunting.
the so yeah, for the listeners, I knew this question was coming, and I initially thought about it, and then I forgot about it, and then yesterday I thought, right, Ashwin's going to ask me this question about the fruit, and so have no answer for you. Now I was trying to think actually, do you think is it like you can't really, I mean, can you really be do you want to be the fruit that you like to eat? I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? Kind of a bit of a weird thing. It's kind of like it's not really what's your favorite fruit question, is it? It's kind of like what fruit would you be? It's quite a
Yeah.
do you ever get people just saying what they want to eat themselves?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. And it's like because a lot of times the fruit you like has some properties that you're attracted to. And
Yeah, yeah.
so
Well, I always used to like peaches.
hmm,
I was a kid. I used to like peaches. Um, I don't know why. I think because they're sort of soft, aren't they, and kind of like
hmm,
fuzzy. And I just really like peach juice. We had a peach tree, so it was like a sort of white flesh peach, which was quite nice. But so yeah, that or I don't know why, but then I sort of thought of a kiwi fruit, and I'm not sure why. There's some psychoanalysis can go on, and I don't need to do it myself.
right. Both fuzzy fruits.
Both exactly. There we go. What does that mean? So maybe the kiwi's like the kind of slightly like the old, like as a kid I like peaches. Now I'm sort of going for the kiwi because it's kind of like a bit more, I don't know, a little bit harder, little bit more abrasive. There you
Nice.
go. I'm already psychoanalyzing it. Maybe I should stop.
Yeah, I think the peach is a good one. Nobody else has said a peach so far, so
Okay, let's go
you'd
with
be
the
the
peach
first
then.
peach.
Let's stick with the peach.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
peach. And yeah.
great. So let's rewind time and look back at childhood. When you were growing up, were you always creative? Did you know drawing was something you wanted to do, or was that something that came later in life as things evolved?
Yeah, I always loved drawing. I always loved drawing from a really young age. I feel that sort of I identified with drawing from like I don't know, like from being in primary school or before primary school
Yeah,
when I was
yeah.
very young. So my sort of earliest memories of drawing would be at school, I suppose. And I don't think they still do it like this now, but we used to have like these sort of books, this quite wide sort of format books in our school where you could draw and then you had like a little line at the bottom and you were supposed to write a sentence like sort of along the bottom to go with the drawing. So it was kind of like words and pictures kind of
Right.
thing. And I really, yeah, really remember that. And then showing it to the teacher and, getting and sort of them being like, oh, this is really, you should go and you should go and show the head teacher. That's so obviously maybe that there's some sort of little kernel of something in there that kind of kicked me off into drawing because I had had an affinity with it.
Mm,
And I remember doing like you were supposed to do. I think you could draw anything, but then you could write a sentence about what you'd done yesterday or what you'd done at the weekend or something. But then I
yeah.
remember doing like a Winnie the Pooh kind of and Piglet like making a snowman or something. I just remember drawing this. So I still have it somewhere actually. I haven't. It's all in a box somewhere, but I should get it out at some point. Have a look at it. See if it's as I remember it.
Yeah, yeah. And did that sort of like characterize who you were that from then on because you got appreciation for your art? You were like,
I think
okay,
so.
my place
Yeah.
is as the artist in school sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I think so. I feel like yeah, all the way through it was sort of in the class I was the one who could sort of like that I was the kid who could draw kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then that pretty much carried on, I would say, sort of throughout school. Because yeah, because I just love drawing. I loved it. I loved. I mean, I did then sort of as I got older, I liked sort of writing as well.
Mm.
Kind of more descriptive kind of writing. Used to enjoy. But I always loved, yeah, illustrated books. So
Yeah, like that was my backup plan. It was like if I couldn't do something with drawing, I was gonna like study English
right,
and write stories and stuff like that. So it's
yeah.
interesting
So
that you
you
had.
enjoy you like drawing as well? Because you
Oh yeah,
as
yeah.
very small.
Oh yeah. There's a story of me at the age of 5 or 6. My mom retells this of me asking her if I could draw for a living.
Right.
Growing up in India at that time, it seemed like an impossible thing.
What was the
But
answer?
she said, maybe we'll see.
Well, so it kept it
Yeah.
open.
Yeah, yeah. She was. My parents were very open and encouraging of my gifts, so I was very fortunate that way,
Yeah, yeah,
as opposed to some of my friends who got the choice of being either a doctor, engineer, or IT
right.
professional. Yeah,
You're not going to be an artist, basically.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, But so then how did you progress out of school? Like, did you go to college for illustration or did you choose a different path? What actually led you down to becoming an illustrator and then
Yeah.
eventually a children's book creator?
Um, I so studied. So I kind of yeah, I was trying to work out. I think when I was finishing school, so I did a foundation year, like an art foundation year after
Right.
school. And at that point, I was trying to work out what I was going to do, at university. And I'd always wanted to do something in animation. I wanted
Mm,
to make sort of moving images. Um, and I went and I yeah applied for a course or whatever, but I got in on a course up in Hull School of Art and Design,
right.
and so I studied animation, did a BA in animation, sort of came out of that, and then was trying to find a way of um, find some work
Right, right.
after uni.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah. Why was animation important to you or why were you interested in it?
I'd loved. I mean, I was a like so as a teenager, I really was a big fan of urban animations.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so like obviously, I mean, I'm not saying they were unknown at the time. Obviously, they were known, but like I think they're much more mainstream known now. Like
Yeah.
since doing feature films and stuff. But at that point, I think they'd done because they won an, I think a Grand Day Out. I think won an Oscar. I think maybe the
Mm,
Wrong Trousers did. The Wrong Trousers always was always it still remains my
yeah.
favorite animated film. Um, but yeah, so I loved all that kind of stuff, and then it sort of grew from that. And then when I was thinking about studying animation, I guess there was a point where I could have done illustration,
Yeah.
or like maybe even gone into more like sort of fine art or illustration or whatever. But I decided I wanted to do it animation because I wanted
Mm,
to. I think I just wanted to do something that was beyond image making,
yeah.
like kind of like my interests were sort of deeper than a still image,
Sure.
or that's how I felt at the time. That's sort of my kind of logic, I suppose. So I was like, I'd love to do that. I'd love to make films. I'd just make things move, really. That kind of,
Mm,
I suppose if things move in your head and then you draw them, then it's kind of like, well, how could I now? What's the next level? So,
yeah.
so yes, that's what led me to study animation.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, like for myself, animation was a brand new course in India at the time. I was studying visual communications, and I realized after the first year that the course was going to be theoretical and not practical. So I was like,
Right.
there's no way I'm going to just do theory, right? So I was on
Mm.
the lookout for something else to do, and a brand new animation course had popped up, and I was like, I've always loved cartoons, so
Right. Okay.
why don't I give this a bash?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
finished the course and I was like, I never want to animate. I
Yeah, I
enjoyed the
mean, it,
storytelling aspect, but
yeah, the
not so much.
storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like I think if I look at it, what it kind of did, because the course that I was on was like very much uh it was sort of like trying to make you into like a film director. Like it wasn't so
Mm,
much like anime. I mean, really, it would have been better if it had have actually had more practical animation skills in it, I think.
right,
Uh,
right.
but it sort of didn't. It was kind of a little bit like here's some sort of worksheets. Let's like sort of work through that. Um, but I used to like, so it kind of got me into then using like software afterwards.
Mm,
So I then like learn how to use After Effects. And so, yeah, so then I kind of was sort of doing that side of it, but then getting into animation directing. So I worked with Jim Field and I worked together.
yeah.
So we met at uni. So this was like I think probably met Jim in Freshers Week at uni, and realised we were on the same course, which was animation, and then kind of struck up a friendship from there, and then kind of went on to then do. So after uni, we were both in the same boat where we were obviously like looking for work, and both sort of trying to do our own kind of thing, sort of in like kind of doing a bit of illustration work.
Mm,
Um, and I got into doing some stuff with. So I did a book with Usborne Publishing, must be around sort of 2003, and I did that, which was called On the Moon. So it was like all this
okay.
kind of NASA photography that they bought the sort of rights to use in the illustration, and then I was sort of blending that with Photoshop, sort of overlaying it all. And so kind of doing that. But yeah, and then in the background was trying to then, obviously studied animation. And then Jim and I decided to sort of more seriously join forces because I'd come down to London and with like a DVD show reel. And then, like these we both did these little sort of like DVD packs, like show reel things,
Right, right.
and then make like six of them or something, and then we'd meet up in London and then go and sort of hawk them round, like go and knock on the doors of studios and like try and try and get some employment, which was generally fruitless, but eventually then got repped and asked to do some like little music video things for Island Records
Right.
and the Fratellis. We did these little things for them. And then we'd also, maybe we'd also already done actually this little independent music video for this Welsh band called Camera, and we made this little film about a maggot kind of on a fishing line, sort of dropping into the sea. It's on YouTube somewhere. It's called Out on the Water. And yeah, so that was yeah. I mean, what's that now? 20, 20 odd years ago. So yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, so animation, and then sort of doing that, and then the two of us worked together for several years, like, and got repped at a company called Partisan, where
Mm.
we made commercials and music videos and stuff like that. So yeah, kept us busy for a while.
So what then drew you out of animation and into the world of children's books? Obviously, you'd done that one-off piece
Yeah.
for Osborne, but then did it suddenly start getting consistent, or
Yeah, so that was bubbling away sort of in the background, and then
right?
I think the main thrust was the animation work and the kind of like commercials and stuff, because obviously it paid money, so it was like, it was
Yeah,
actual paid work, and then the illustration was kind of just in the background. And I carried on. I did like two more books for Usborne in that same
right,
sort of series with these sort of semi kind of non-fiction sort of titles. Um, and then I think and in that time period, maybe I'd already met my agent Vicky Wilden Lebrecht at Bright. I'd already met her because I
right,
was living down. Actually, I was living in Tooting, and then she lived in Balham, it was quite close by, and I've been contacting agents during that period. But this was sort of before Jim and I kind of kicked off with our kind of commercial stuff. So I sort of was with her, but like, my portfolio was fairly sparse at that point, and like,
sure,
and then obviously the animation stuff started off, and so I was kind of doing that, and it's kind of, and then I ended up, yeah, doing some. I did a picture book for Meadowside, which was they don't exist anymore, but this book called Hodge the Hedgehog.
right,
So that was my first sort of like more kind of, I guess, style wise, like I started to develop into something that was a bit more kind of like directional, like that I wanted to do.
sure.
Um, kind of more interesting sort of color palette and that kind of stuff. And then yeah, and then I guess, yeah, then I was still doing the animation stuff in the background, and then eventually I was doing some stuff for Simon and Schuster as well. I did a couple of picture books with them that other authors had written, and then I was had the kind of like the very early stages of Storm Whale, and my art director Nia there at the time, she said, it's like I showed her some sort of drawings I've been doing of these sort of beach huts. And, it's basically like the opening spread from the Storm Whale.
Right.
I'd kind of done that as an image, and she was like, "Oh, what's this? What's this about?" And so then I said, "Well, I made this film, so it was actually a film that I made at university, so it was my sort of graduation piece."
Right.
Yeah, and so then I developed that over probably about 3 years,
Wow.
on and off. Like doing other stuff. I was still working in animation, and in fact, Jim and I then kind of moved to a different animation company that was sort of closer to home, in East London, and we did a title sequence for Filth, the feature film of the Irvine Welsh
Right.
novel. So we did that. That's like the sort of the last piece of sort of big work that we did together.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I was yeah, trying to sort of get the Stormwell going off the ground, kind of thing. So yeah.
What so where did the story come from? What inspired you to write that?
Well, the film that I'd made at uni was quite similar in a lot of
Right.
ways. Like it was it set, the bare bones of it were the same. So
Sure. Okay.
it was about you know a little boy finding a whale on the beach, taking it home, putting it in the bath. His dad coming home, his dad sort of coming home with a bucket of fish, and like you know, then you realize he's a fisherman, and it's kind of like there was a bit more high stakes in it, I think, because it kind of felt more like, oh God, what's he going to do? What's he going to do to the whale? Like, you know,
Right, right, right.
which we sort of we toned down in the not that it was really like overt, but there was like
Yeah, yeah.
there was a scene where he's like sort of chopping up fish with a knife, and it's kind of like this knife chopping down, and the head's rolling off and stuff. So that was a little bit more graphic, but yeah. So, but essentially, you know, and then they take it back to the sea, and it was like
Right.
that's really what the thread of it was. So then what I had to do is I had to kind of take that and then go right. How am I going to turn that into a picture book, right?
Yeah.
So and at that point, I'd never done it. I mean, I'd done other picture books where I'd been sent the layout and all the text was already in place, but hadn't, you know, taken something that was existing as like this film that I'd made, and having to turn it into, you know, 13 spreads or however many I was going to kind of, I didn't know what I was, you know, really doing. So, so yeah, so I broke it down and I had all these notebooks with all from the time when I've made the film, and then I kind of took that, and then I was like, how am I going to turn that into a book? Don't know how you know, because I got like storyboards, which obviously were quite comprehensive because it was scene by scene sort of storyboards,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then when you're going to put that in a picture book, you're not going to like I was like, well, I'm not going to have a close up, you know, I'm not going to. I mean, you can do obviously if
Yeah,
you did it.
yeah.
Yeah, you could do a close up, but it didn't feel like that was the sort of book it was. So I wasn't trying to do that. I was trying to sort of keep it quite kind of framed similarly from spread to spread.
Mm.
Um, and and yeah, and then so sort of then did like little thumbnail sketches and then put them all out, like laid them all out in like one big kind of Photoshop kind of page, like a sort of storyboard, and then started typing my little bits and pieces, and then eventually I made a dummy. And but I used to in those days I would always make them like with and sort of stitch them with thread and you know kind of make these little books. But I don't do that anymore because it's too time. So I just do it in InDesign now, um,
And
which some people will
that's
probably find
good.
that. Well, I don't know. You know, I always find there's like sort of purists go, "Oh no, you've got to make the book and you've got to do the thing." And I'm like, if you've got time, fantastic. That's really good. I love to be, you know what I mean? Like digital is
Yeah.
just like I love the ability to edit with digital. Like,
Mm.
and as much as like I do love to draw on paper and I love to do things, you know, and sort of properly.
Yeah.
But like, there's just, you know, I don't know. There's not always time for that. So,
Yeah.
and it can sort of like feed into the process, I think, and like feed into the look of something, and that's not to be sniffed at at all. I don't mean it from that. I don't, you know, there's totally value in doing that kind of stuff, but like just for me personally, I just find it like much. You just, you know, you can like sometimes I'll even sit there and I'll kind of evolved it more into like have these sheets where I've got like the right scale of framing and print them
Mm.
off. Like, so I've got maybe four of them on an A4 sheet, and then do it on like a sort of thicker paper, like a watercolor paper, and then use like ink and draw like directly onto those. Then I'll maybe photograph them and then sort of and then stick them straight in InDesign and then start
Right.
typing like over the top of it. Or I might have written it before I've even started the thumbnails now. So then I've got the text and then I'll sort of drop the text in.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I've ever done it as a physical book. I've always
Right.
drawn them digitally, just for time and ease and to save money. Just be like, I can see it all there and then
Yeah.
get a cheap print done,
Yeah. Yeah.
get it
Yeah. To
over
me, you
to.
sort of like you can, you know, if you can, it's so adaptable. You just like you would drop something in, you can delete it, you can move it around, you can, you know what I mean? It's like I
Yeah.
just find that, and then it's like instantaneous to me. I'm like, I don't feel like I need to have it physically at that point. It doesn't, and then once you've got it into a sort of tighter place, you can print it off and then kind of look at it and check that it does all kind of work in a more physical way. But
Mm,
maybe once you get used to the format of a picture book as well, like you need to do that less, perhaps.
yeah. Well, what do you think was your biggest challenge in transitioning more into picture books and learning to write for that versus filmmaking? Um,
Um, I suppose yeah, I mean, that, I guess it is that the difference between the two. Like, I think, because essentially I think I realized later that, like, whilst I'd been wanting to write and illustrate my own books, that that was the same in a way as
yeah,
making films. Like, and I think that's where it all kind of came together a bit more,
yeah,
because I realized that's what I was trying to do, more than sort of illustrate as such. If that makes sense. It was like I was trying to
yeah.
sort of bring that sort of storytelling. That was the thing that started me off loving drawing and loving animation. And then I found that I could kind of like transfer that into sort of, so when it kind of like, when I realized that having a career sort of like making, because I kind of thought short films
Mm,
like be somehow sustaining. I don't think that was ever realistic, but it was kind of what I came out of uni sort of thinking,
yeah,
which I don't know. Maybe a lot of people think that when they study animation, they think, "Oh, I'm going to make short films," and then you sort of can't. It doesn't really work
right.
like that. Um, so then when I went into the commercial side of animation, and then was doing a bit of illustration in the background, but then then I came to writing and illustrating picture books, and it all sort of came together in that one place.
Yeah,
Made
yeah,
made a lot more sense, I suppose.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if I
For
just answered your question or if I went on a tangent.
no, I think that makes sense. Like the challenge was kind of like pulling those two worlds that you were interested in and
Mm,
putting them together in a new place,
yeah,
which then uh, came down to the core of what you were hoping to do, which was
yeah,
tell these compelling stories. And
yeah,
it just so happened that this was the best medium to suit
yeah,
what you
yeah.
had in mind.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sums it up better.
Yeah. What do you think is or makes a great story? What is it that compels you to write the stories that have been writing?
Mm,
They seem to be deeply emotive,
mm,
but at the same time, there's a sense of play in them. What like for instance with Tad, it's quite a
mm,
playful story, but it's also quite emotive
mm,
in the sense of the loneliness and trying to find your place to belong
mm,
in some
mm,
ways.
mm.
What drives that for you?
Um, I think, like, when I sort of retrospectively look at the books that I've written, I
Yeah,
think, like, I never when I made the Storm Whale, I hadn't really realized how much, even though it's sort of obvious in a way, but like, how much yourself you do actually put in your books.
yeah,
So I think there's, whilst it's in, I'm not going to say it's in any way sort of autobiographical, and definitely not literally,
yeah,
but like in a kind of metaphorical sense, I can see the sort of resonance in there, and I think then when you write other stories, I think you're always bringing, you bring your own experience and your own life experience to the book,
mm,
and I, yeah, like Tad. That was interesting with Tad, actually, because I was reading this book called Into the Woods, which is about sort of script writing, and I think it's John York, I think, who wrote it. It's like it's just sort of generally storytelling, and I quite hooked onto this idea of like this nemesis idea, so that like there's sort of like a two sort of there's like a juxtaposition of like the sort of the hero of the story and then the nemesis, and like
Mm.
what is that nemesis? Like, what are they sort of fighting against, kind of thing. So I wanted to do that in quite a pronounced kind of way. So I was like, they've got this tiny little tadpole, and
Yeah.
then this big fish, and it's like this is sort of opposites of each other. One wants to eat the other one needs to escape, and it's kind of like that's kind of where that came from. But obviously, then within that, there is, it's I think it's like putting yourself in the character. Like, I don't mean yourself
Mm.
actually, but like when you imagine that character, like what it's doing. But I think
Yeah.
this is true to like any like illustration, is like
Mm.
have to sort of feel what the character is feeling. You have to kind of understand the character. Like it's a little bit like acting, I think, even though I don't actually act, but like I think
Right.
I act through the characters, like the way that I pose the character, like put the character, if it's like Noi, sort of like the hand, where the hand is on the whale stroking. Do you know what I mean? Like you sort of
Yeah.
feel it as you illustrate it. I don't know if that's
Mm.
the same for you. But that's just the only that's the way that I think I do it. I've always imagined. I've always been, really like I don't know, like very much in my head. I've always like really imagined what
Yeah.
this thing is, or this character is, or like when my imagination is sort of firing up, if I'm kind of like imagining a scene or part of a story and what happens next, how
Yeah.
does the character react, how do they move. I'm not really asking myself those questions, how do they move. I'm just kind of like going, I can feel what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that same for you? I don't,
Yeah, yeah. Oftentimes, I would have written a piece, and then once I started drawing it, I changed the words because I feel like the character's saying something slightly different.
right.
Once I start drawing him out, like his personality or his or her personality starts coming out, and that sense of the character, then I need to then tweak the words a little to
Mhm.
rematch it with that personality. Even though
Mhm.
there was like an overarching idea, I think the characters then come alive and start
Mhm.
telling you bits and bobs of their
Yeah.
own story in there.
Yeah. Yeah. But and I guess those sort of, that has to be like there's an element of experience, or like observing someone else's experience, that informs that, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't come from nowhere, so you have to have seen it or heard it or felt it yourself. So I
Mm,
suppose coming back to your question, it's kind of like I think it's a lot of the stuff, particularly I think because of writing for children of that like a young age,
mm,
when I'm writing, or when I'm writing, meaning drawing or writing,
yeah.
I'm whilst I'm not like really super aware of the audience,
Mm,
like I know that I'm writing like in that space, like for myself, in myself, that like I'm
yeah.
sort of, I guess, kind of channeling a bit of how that felt, maybe, or like my experience as a child, like comes it
Your
really,
inner child,
yeah,
you're
really
talking
comes
back
in.
to him.
Totally. It's like it's definite. That's where yeah. And I've found that actually quite difficult to write sort of outside of that, when it's
Mm,
like a different kind of character. A bit
yeah.
like I have a different experience writing when I'm doing that. It's like it's probably why then, like with Noi, why I've gone back to Noi quite a few times, because kind of wanted to explore further, like
Yeah.
what he's doing or what he's up to, because I feel like he just is still, he's still living on, like in my head somewhere, more than the other characters. Like I've never really thought, oh, I'll write another book about Tad. It's never sort of come into my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's generally how it sort of works for me. Is
Mm,
feeling the feelings yourself, and then maybe you attach them to a character, or you apply them to something in a, but not in a kind of forced way, like in a, the way you just draw, like drawing sometimes will bring something out, won't it, in your,
yeah.
of what you're feeling, or what um, and characters kind of appear that way. So, and in fact, Tad, that came from, I did I'd done the drawing of of a frog looking sort of at this, and I think it was, I don't never really know if it was the moon or or the sunset, but it was a big orb of sort of pale yellow on a sort of hot pink kind of background, with these kind of like jungly kind of vines and stuff, and the frog looking a little bit wistfully up at this moon, should we say?
Right.
And I was like, oh, I don't know what the story is for that. And but the thing was, this was like when I was still working on the storm whale, so I'd
Right.
made this.
Right.
And it was kind of like, it was just a bit of a, it was just a, often like I used to on a Sunday, I would do like sort of work, like sort of, I mean, for want of a better word, development stuff, but I would just be like exploring ideas, and I'd have an idea to, do this. And so this frog was sitting on this leaf, and then I was like, oh yeah, but I don't know what the story is. And then I kind of like every now and again over the next couple of years, I kind of would think about this frog, but I didn't really have a story for it. And then it must have been, so after I'd done Grandad's Island, like beyond that, probably like 2017 or something like that, then I'd had I'd been again I'd been thinking about it, and then I'd done some drawings of some tadpoles, and I had this one um, of a little tadpole sort of like poking its head up over the water, and I just was like, I just had this sort of sentence of like, Tad was a frog. Well, that's not quite true.
Yeah.
He was almost a frog, right? So that
Yeah.
was just like, so I don't know, it's just like, where do those sort of things come from? But like that
Yeah.
totally was like the bit, that was the moment that I was like, that's it. Like, as in,
Right.
that's the story of the frog. It's like, you're not a frog, but you're gonna be a frog.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
I know that, and that sounds super simple, doesn't it? In its kind of
Yeah.
conceit, and it kind of is. But it was, I suppose that's the thing. You're searching for stories. You're looking, and there's all these ideas about, oh, this frog could have these tadpoles, or they could have laid these eggs, and they're trying to look after them. And then there's a moon, and they're trying to climb up the tree. Do they want to get to the moon? And it's like the moon's reflected in a pool, and it's like all these sort of things that could be relative to this story, but actually
Yeah.
none of them were relative to it. And actually, the thing that became relative to it was that it was just a tadpole who's going to become a frog. So that
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
opening line, it's almost like that's the promise of the story.
Right.
And then, she was almost a frog. So then it's kind of like, that's where I then took that and then was like, right, well, she's obviously going to become a frog at the end.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
happens in between? And then this sort
Yeah.
of nemesis thing of like the big blub, the fish, being this, just like that tension, that underlying sort of to drive the story forward,
Yeah.
and be in opposition to the main character.
And do you have a real life nemesis that sort of
Real life.
metaphorically drove?
I don't know.
Whatever.
I think like, it's I guess all story, like, because even if you like, even if it wasn't like a physical nemesis, like the nemesis
Mm,
could be just like some sort of discontent in
yeah.
yourself, or it could be, I suppose it's like anything that can trigger a story as well, is sort of becomes that thing, or like a backdrop, which is what with the storm whale, it's like, whilst it's not about that specifically, but the storm is
Mm,
like the underlying sort of like energy, or like something that kind of, it brings the whale. There's that change, isn't there?
right.
So, but because I didn't like, even though I studied animation, I didn't really study. I don't know. Somehow, maybe just like it, we did. I didn't sort of study it in a sort of theoretical way, so I wasn't really super aware of like some of these kind of narrative mechanisms. And then it's
Right.
more like, since I've started then doing more books, that then I've kind of gone, oh, I need to delve a bit deeper into this, how storytelling kind of
Right.
works, and learn more about it. And so that's kind of, you know, I've learned more by doing that, really.
And so from that learning process, have you discovered systems that you've created for yourself to help you work through a book or work through a story that has made it easier over time, or is it just as much a struggle today as it was when you were first doing Storm Whale?
Um, it's different in that often what I do now is I write the text first.
Yeah,
Um, and that kind of started sort of on, I think that was on Tad, that sort of started like that, or maybe a little bit on Grandad's Island, actually, I suppose. Um, because I started to find that, like, when I did the pictures first and then I wanted to apply the words afterwards,
yeah,
that it was like I've got the pictures, I've already told the story, relatively told the story, sort of like visually, and now I
yeah,
need to add the words. Like, what are the words? What are they? Because I've done it with the pictures. What are the words? I don't know how to do. So it's like, what do you pick, like, out of all the things you could say about this thing? Because you could take it in so many directions, right? It could be,
yeah.
you could write, within reason, you could write anything,
Mm,
You might even write something that was like the opposite of what you were looking at. It could be like totally, trying to sort of, upend what you're, I know some people work in that way. So it's kind of, could be, but it could be anything. Um, so, um, so that's but writing it first I find is like I then sort of, whilst I'm not separating the two jobs completely, but like the first job is the writing and then the second job is the illustrating, like in
mm,
that way. But obviously visually, like I've come up with it in my head, but like I sort of found it's not so much easier, but like there's more of I can sort of put my head into a more of like a sort of storytelling mode
right,
for the text. I can sort
right.
of tell the story as I see it in my head,
Mm,
or I've committed sort of the drawings, if you like. And there might
yeah,
be some key moments that I want to get in there, but it's kind of, I found it kind of better to just sort of do that and get that sort of text sort of working in a kind of, um, with a certain sort of like voice and rhythm and pace to it. Um, I can sort of feel like I can unfold a story
right.
better doing that than if I drew it first. I
And
think it's like that's one of the like that's one of the big challenges, really.
mm,
A bit like when I've spoken to students about doing that and how they always want to know how do you do that? How do you write? Like, do you know what I mean? It's like this
yeah,
sort of like
yeah,
what's this formula in between these two things, words and pictures, and how it all operates. And I honestly have no no scientific way of doing it. I just sort
yeah,
of do
yeah.
it. It's just like I just think it's almost like you just got to like find this. And I think that's the thing that's happened a few times. Like Tad was like that. The snowflake was like that. Um, like these sort of even the Stormware was a bit like that. That
Mm,
this first line or part of this story comes in to your mind, and you just sort of have to crystallize something about like, and that's the only way I can describe it. That
yeah,
doesn't sound solid enough to me, but it's almost like, so the storm whale, it was Noy lives with his dad and six cats by the sea, and it's like that was like the moment when I sort of was so I'd drawn these beach huts,
right.
this image that I was saying years before it was going to be a book, and it was just based on the idea of the film that I'd done before, but I'd seen these beach huts, and these beach huts weren't like in the film that I'd made. It was just like a little hut thing, but it wasn't the same. So it's like there's these beach huts, and there's this, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to put those two characters who then had evolved in my head to be the characters, sort of pretty much as you see them now. But so the
Yeah,
dad's there, and then and the cats weren't in the film. I didn't have time to animate cats. Nobody wants to animate cats, six cats. But when I drew that image, the dad went in and Noi went in, and then the cats are like sort of, and I was like, oh yeah, cats. And I was like, Noi lived with his dad and six cats by the sea. So
yeah.
like that then was like that felt like the beginning of something, right?
Right, right. Yeah.
And then it sort of came out of that, and the same with as I've described with Tad, how it kind of came
Mm,
out of that sentence, and yeah, so that's what I kind of find is like I will just like, I'll have an idea brewing, and it might be that I've done a drawing, especially if it's a
Mm.
new thing. So Noi is a bit different because obviously I've drawn him a lot of times now, and I know it. I wouldn't necessarily need to draw him to then think of a new story. But if I
Yeah.
start thinking of new context for a story, then suddenly I might start going in another direction with it, and then something will come from that. But if it's a new thing, yeah, I might have. It might be something that was in a sketchbook, that then becomes, yeah, like a kind of moment where I'll just be
Mm.
like, I know I've just been brewing on it for a while, and then suddenly, like, I'm making it all sound very mystical and magical, and it really isn't. Just like, but it is that sort of thing. But then I suppose it is a little bit. It's a little bit like you just suddenly something triggers, like, I don't know, you look at something or you've done something, and then it's kind of like you go, ah, yeah, that could be the
Mm.
sentence, a sentence. That's like
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
like that feels like it's like a little thread, and it's like suddenly it's like pulled, and then you get pulled into it, and it can just unravel. So again,
yeah.
thinking of Tad, so I'd got that sentence that I'd written to go with this image of the tadpole, but then it's like after, I don't know, maybe it had been like a couple of weeks, and then
Yeah.
suddenly I'm like, I I start making a note of this on my phone, and I wrote like a very raw version, first draft of it, but like in like a few hours or something.
Yeah.
And then that was it. It was like sort of, you know, a thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Even though you say you don't have a system, you sort of do in the sense that it
Mm.
starts with a potential character or a drawing or an idea that is percolating in the back of your mind, and
Yeah.
then it seems that the system you've set up is the first thing is finding that first sentence that is an invitation to the story or a summary of what the story could be in one line. I think that's a good way to look at things
Mm.
is because it breaks down the process and you're not like writing a whole paragraph. You're like, I'll start with one sentence and then
Yeah.
see where that sentence then pulls me along
Yeah.
depending on the character. And
Yeah.
then it seems like you sit on that for a while, right?
Yeah.
Uh, do you like from all the books that you've written, have you ever just written them all in one shot, or is it always this sort of like percolating process that's happening in the background where you might get the character, you might get a line, and then a couple of weeks later, suddenly all that information is sort of like downloaded, and you're like, oh
Mm.
right, this all the connection starts happening, and you start writing it down.
Yeah, I think it's in the background. It's all in the
Right.
background, and then it's
Yeah.
like there'll just be like a moment, and it could be like the point that I come up with the
Mm.
sentence, which is the one that triggers the whole thing, or it
Yeah.
might be a bit later on. But it's
Yeah.
like, and then when it sort of happens, it's sort of I do. It feels like, I mean, I've got ideas like that where I have written them down, and they're ones that I've never then made it into a book, because then I don't know, something else has sort of kind of got in the way of them, or they don't feel quite right the way they
Mm.
solve or whatever. But I guess it's the ones that do work. There's others where I've written down, um like, yeah, like just like a sentence or something. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's one that I had where it's like, yes, it's just sort of, it was about a bee, and it was about this sort of, and it was this sentence, and it sounded really good, but
Mhm.
then it just never went anywhere else. Just never
Yeah.
went. Just I as much as I've sort of gone back and sort of gone, oh, what's the what bit like I did with the Tad one. I'd be like, what's the? But I mean, we're talking like a longer period of time, so I don't know whether
Yeah.
that one's
But sometimes
never going to turn
maybe,
into anything. But maybe one day it will, and I'll just
yeah.
be like, "Oh my God, that's it! I've got it! I've got this." Because it's sort of like you've got like an image or a character. Like I was saying with Tad, and it's a really good example of it. It's like you've got this thing, and you sort of want it to be something else,
Yeah.
but it's not quite there, and it's not a thing. And then eventually, just like this jigsaw puzzle piece or several come into, place, fall into place, and then it is something, and it can it has its own energy at that point.
Yeah. So is journaling or drawing journaling something that you do actively that kind of keeps all these ideas in the background, or what is a practice within your practice that allows you to continue to develop ideas?
Yeah. Um, I always think I should do more with sketchbooks. I seem to do it in waves. I sort of go through
Yeah.
waves of like doing sketchbook stuff, where I get very sort of into it and I really enjoy drawing again. And I'm like, and then I just go through huge periods of time where I'm not doing that at all.
Mm,
Um, and I sort of try not to get to, because I sort of even me saying that to you, I feel a bit guilty somehow, like, oh, I haven't been doing any drawing. But I mean, partly so recently, what I've been doing is because I'm working on a book for kind of like more like 9 to 12 year olds, and like that is that's don't want to say proper writing. That's proper writing. I mean, it's a lot of words. It's a lot of
yeah.
words. Like my draft at the moment, I'm on like the third draft. It's about 60,000 words.
Oh wow.
So like that is really consuming to do that many
Mm,
words, and there's not a lot of room in my head for then actually drawing as well. So like
yeah.
every now and again, I will dip it because I'm going to illustrate it afterwards. But I've done some drawing towards it.
Sure.
Um, but in terms of like new sort of picture book stuff, I think that's a little bit been on the back burner. And I've got something I'm working on, which I'm going to be working on more so later in the year.
Right.
Got the real bare bones of it as text.
Right.
But I've done some drawings for it, like, but I haven't got a lot of drawings for it, and I need to sit down and do the drawing. I need to start drawing. Like, it needs to happen. But until it's like a little blockage. It's like
Mm,
everything. I feel like everything has to kind of come after the thing that you're doing.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not very good at. I mean, I guess everybody works differently, but like doing like multiple I have to have the one main pursuit. Like I
Mm,
can't be working on multiple ones. Um, but yeah, so sketchbooks. I don't know. Yeah, it's just like I think I always sort of think should do more, but don't. I don't know why. I don't know. It's like I think words seem to have overtaken in sort
right.
of last couple of years. It's become more about that. Um, yeah,
Mm.
I think there's a second part to that question, which I've now forgotten what you said.
And no, I'd just asked around that, like, because then you'd have a reference point for some of the ideas that came, like tag.
Right. Oh yeah,
You've
like
done a
for
sketch,
developing new
or
stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's funny actually. The other thing, like with that, was that the Tad one. I keep referencing the Tad one, but the Tad one that was like a thing, and I put it on Instagram.
Right.
Um, and like in a way, there was a point where I probably did do that a bit more with Instagram. Sort of used it as like a kind of like place to put things,
Mm,
uh, and then I was sort of finding like I shouldn't really put all this stuff out there. Because it's a bit like these are your ideas and you kind of like you're trying to develop them. I don't know. And then more recently, I'm now not putting anything really on Instagram very often at all. Like
right.
I've withdrawn from Instagram quite a lot,
Right.
because I just realized how distracting I was finding Instagram, putting
Okay.
stuff on this. A couple of years ago, I kind of like just really like stopped putting stuff on there. And I only put stuff now when there's like a real kind of relevant moment rather than just kind of be like, oh, I'll, put a drawing on there that I've done or, you know,
So are
because
you
just want.
phased out of all social media, or is it just
So
Instagram?
I've still got the accounts. I've still got Twitter, and sorry, not Twitter, X. And I've still got Facebook. But I mean, I don't. I was discussing this with someone last night. Actually, it's like I just, yeah, I don't put stuff on them at all. And
Mm,
I'm very much like I'm saying this in a way. Obviously, who knows where things go. But I've very much started to go into a phase of like I'm not. I don't think it's a great thing for people's brains. I feel like this is becoming more relevant now, like
yeah.
that we shouldn't be doing all this sort of. online stuff all the time. And so for myself, I feel like like in terms of a mental health kind of position, it's better to not be on there all the time and like so distracting. I mean, that's the only word I can. Well, addictive and distracting. Like it's addictive, and there was a point where I sort of used to think, oh, it's a kind of a bit shameful to say that I've got addicted to this thing, right? But it is actually, you know, I think because it's now more known how addictive these things are, it sort of feels a bit more like, okay, no, I mean, yeah, like I've struggled to like put, like not keep looking at my phone like often.
Mm,
You post something on there, it's very hard to then like just forget about it and not worry
right.
about that thing. So um
But do you feel like you can be in that position because you're more established and you don't have to worry about new projects per se, whereas
I'd
a
say
younger
so, yeah. Yeah,
artist
I'd say so.
who's still
There's probably a
building,
lot of that. Yeah.
yeah,
We can watch my publishing career dwindle in real time as the as I stop posting full time and nobody knows where I am or who I am, what I'm doing. So that's the fear though, isn't it? It's the fear.
yeah,
It's like, these sort of things are, you know, we're all kind of hooked into it. You're right. There is something in that for sure that like, yeah, kind of there's less need to be on there like
yeah,
now. And I think it's a nice tool to be able to like, often get like people send me like little messages about their kid reading my books and
mm,
how it's really helped their family. If it's like Grandad's Island, they'll like often get messages from people about that. And I like to be able to respond to that if I can. I don't always get the time to respond to all the messages, but it's like,
sure,
it's nice to have that bit of contact, I think.
yeah.
And I like, it's just, yeah, it's really humbling to sort of see those things. But yeah, it's yeah, it's a tricky one. How often are you on there? Are you on there a lot, or are you?
I'm on there pretty consistently, but I view it as a business tool,
Yeah,
and not so much as a, I don't know. I'm not necessarily going there for endorphins per se, though
yeah,
that happens automatically, you know. But like for me, it's been a great tool to help advance my career, get in front of people that I would not have access to otherwise.
hmm
And so, yeah, that's basically I use it quite strategically for my marketing per se,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
it's a free tool with access to
yeah.
everybody,
And do you
not
find it
everybody.
works for that? It works in that way.
It has been over the last 2 or 3 years. I feel like that's been declining because it's less organic and Instagram's not really showing your work even to the people who follow you,
Mm,
which was the whole point of building a following. So,
yeah, I think there's also there's some of that in there, isn't there? It's like I found that you put something on there and you're like, who's looking at this now? Like,
yeah, yeah,
it's become a bit, and it's become like it's not really what it. Oh, I don't want to sound like, oh, it's not what it was. It's
yeah,
not what it was. But it doesn't feel like it is the same as it was when I was first on it. I felt like it
yeah,
was more like there was more of a community vibe going on. And
yeah,
when you went through the feed and you scrolled up, you kind of saw, you could, to a degree, if you weren't following too many people, you could kind of catch up on what everybody else had posted that
yeah,
day or that week or whatever. Whereas
exactly.
now it's just a random factor. It's like, what are you going to get? Are you going to get something you didn't even want to see? Are you going to get
Yeah,
like, am I going to end up buying something
yeah,
because
yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
total mug? And I just like, oh, look at that toothbrush. That's a nice toothbrush. Like all that kind of stuff. Yes, yeah. I don't know. It's a weird thing now. In fact, it's like you can get. It's like everything is on there now. That's the
Yeah,
way it feels. It doesn't feel now like it is that like it was a sort of community of creatives on there.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with
Yeah.
not being creative and being on there. I'm not sort of saying
Yeah.
that, but like that's what it felt like. It felt like that, and maybe like the periphery of that, people just like observing or being like interested in illustration or interested in books, or and then
Yeah.
they would see your what you were putting on there. Um, Whereas now it's like, I guess you're even seeing like kind of news to a degree on there, or like,
Yeah.
and it's like I didn't really want that like from it.
Uh,
That's probably
yeah.
why I've sort of then extracted myself from it more. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so I don't have it on my phone unless, but of course it's designed in such a way that I can't post a story. I can't like share a story from somebody else's post
Right.
about something interesting either,
Yeah.
just to say, oh, like in a way of sort of saying thank you for sort of posting that thing about my work by resharing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't do that without the app. So then I have to put the app back on my phone, do the sharing, get distracted, find out 20 minutes later that I haven't even shared the thing that I went on there to share. I'm watching some ridiculous video about something. Um, and yeah, it's yeah, I don't know. Like we just need less digital things, I think, in our
Mm.
lives, don't we?
Yeah. I mean, like in an ideal world, 100%. Like I'd love it for it to be in person a lot of the time, you know? Um, and if it could be used in specific contexts, it makes sense. Whereas now I feel like it's sort of consuming, it's all consuming. And
Mm,
that's where it's become more problematic.
yeah.
Whereas earlier when I was on Instagram, I'd like look up cool artists that I wanted to follow and see the lovely work that they were doing and start connecting with them and learn from them and that sort of thing. Whereas now it feels like you have to feed this algorithm that is never giving back and just taking,
Yeah.
sucking you
Never
dry.
happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think that's it, isn't it? And then also like, yeah, you could have contact with somebody who,
Yeah.
you like their work, or maybe they'll follow you back, or
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Um, yeah.
Yeah. But I wonder in your career, did you face much pushback when you presented ideas for your books? Or because Stormwell did so well off the bat, you kind of like have had a smooth sailing career in the
Um,
pushing your own ideas versus
Yeah, I mean, there's been a mixture of things where,
right.
I've presented stuff that's not gone down so well, and
Yeah.
then other times it's been pretty straightforward. So
Right.
it's been a mix really, but I suppose what you're kind of asking is like, yeah, the in some ways I think I was lucky with the storm whale, like
Right.
how that kind of came about and unfolded. And it did give me an opportunity beyond where I was before that, which was working as an illustrator.
Yeah.
And yeah, gave me that sort of springboard to do more of what I wanted, like chose more of what I wanted.
Yeah.
But obviously, within that, there's still, you know, um,
Compromise.
you sort of learn, yeah, and you sort of learn what's wanted,
Right.
from your work, the bits that are wanted, and then there's the bits that aren't wanted so much, like, so I suppose there's a bit of a balance there, isn't there, between sort of being true to your sort of own artistic expression and
Mm.
then accepting that publishing can only be a kind of, a commercial, um, you know, outlet.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you can, you have to make compromises somewhere, I think. You
Mm.
couldn't just like produce this kind of like perfect sort of down the line kind of work that sort of hit both those things. you know.
Yeah.
Which is why I think then some people then end up doing like having their own kind of like wanting to express themselves in other ways outside of what they do in the, in the more commercial work. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, certainly with like the author illustrator stuff that I do, I think there is that balance, but it's a balance that is constantly sort of moving around depending on, what feedback I get. And I think you have to
Mm.
be responsive to that feedback, I think that's part of it. You can't be just totally like, oh, this is my idea and this is how it's going to be. I think
Yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
think you get better work out of, and that's the other thing actually is like it's funny how we sort of don't really like credit in sort of books necessarily, but like they're always the product of a group of people.
Mm.
So specifically, they're the product of like you as the author illustrator,
Yeah.
but also the art director, who maybe is also the designer and the editor, and the conversations that you have like between you all.
Yeah.
And I would say certainly on when I did the Storm Whale, that was very much like felt like we created kind of like a blueprint that then I kind of used that going forward with my author illustrator work.
Mm.
Um, and not influenced in a heavy-handed way, but certainly like my editor, Lara Hancock on that, and Nia Roberts, who was the art director, they really helped to shape and steer me and the way that I
Mm.
worked to really make that book what it is. I wouldn't have been able to create that on my own
Right.
for sure.
Yeah. And do you feel like your relationships with those types of people, editors and art directors, has been consistent from the start, or has there been changes in the last 5 years on long-term relationships and how you?
Would you sort of mean like a change in the industry, or do you mean
Yeah.
like, yeah? Um, I wouldn't say I've seen it myself, but I think
Right.
what you're hinting at is the thing that I've sort of is that there is sort of more commercial focus going on and sort of different kind of things kind of at play, like in the wider industry, maybe.
Yeah.
But
Well.
I wouldn't say I've seen it, if that's what you mean. Like
Right.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't say I've
Yeah.
seen it directly.
Well, I'm always curious to see where different people are at. I felt like, based on having conversations like this, um, 10, 15 years ago, there was a lot more investment in the individual artists, and publishers wanted to see those artists flourish. And so there was investment, whether it's in time, or how editors worked with them. Whereas now I feel like, because there's more access to the market, there's a lot more people that they're shuffling, and
Right.
it seems like they just pick certain people that they're like, okay, I'm going to invest in this or this. And
Right.
so even though you do a book, it could not get any publicity or not get any
Yeah.
as much push as, say, another
Yeah.
author at the exact same time with the exact
Yeah.
same budget and everything. So
Yeah.
it's just
No, I
interesting
mean it.
seeing the parallel between those, and how do they choose which one they're going to push and which one they're not, and all the
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah. Yeah. I I must say, like, the thing I do sort of see is like, I think, so when my daughter's 8 now, so she's kind of like, she's, I wouldn't say she's past picture books, but
Mm,
we've still got all of her picture books and she
yeah.
picks them up every now and again and we look at them. But I don't know, I sort of, so when she was little, I read obviously more picture books during that period and it was quite
Yes.
sort of like, um, but I do notice like, like now, and then I'll suddenly I'll be in a bookshop and I'll be like, oh, I'm quite out the loop on this stuff. Maybe because also I've been had my head in this kind of fiction stuff I'm writing, and I've sort of like just sort of looked away from picture books to a degree.
Yeah.
See how much is there, like, and I'm like,
Mm,
there's all this stuff. It's all like trying to vie for your attention, right? It's like
Yeah,
in books generally, you go in a bookshop, it's just like but I'm like, how do all these books are being published, like thousands and thousands of books are being published every year. You know, it's like
yeah, yeah.
like trying to grab your attention, and the next. Maybe there's, that feels a little bit out of control somehow. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And then you're kind of like, hey, I'm over here. I've just written a book. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
even if you're established or even,
Mm,
so then I do think that, like, when you sort of say that, I think, well, if you're not established, like, how much harder is that then to get noticed?
yeah.
Like in that sort of sea of noise.
Well, I
Uh,
think it's this mindset thing as well, because like you spend it's so hard to get in the door, right? And so when you do get in the door, you're like, oh, okay, it's gonna be okay. But then it feels like now you're still not okay. You still have to like prove yourself consistently over and over
yeah,
again
yeah.
until I don't know what the end point is where it switches.
Well,
But
yeah.
that's
I
what
mean,
it seems like
yeah.
at this stage.
Yeah, yeah. You've still got to write the next thing, aren't you? Haven't you?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's tricky.
yeah, 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 for sure, for sure.
Um,
Um,
yeah, I don't think does anyone get to the point where they then, you know, like that's never a thing anymore. I don't know. Like,
I feel like John Classen's there. He seems
well,
to throw an
that's true.
idea and it sticks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, what's that? What's that quality? I'm not
Yeah,
he's I met him actually not that long ago. He's a really nice guy. So,
right. Yeah,
um I think there's a lot of, um I think we should all be working on that more, shouldn't we? Being nice.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for
Uh,
sure.
but easy to say if we're, like you say, yeah, if your books sell. And then there's like the thing is with books selling, it's like they might not actually sell so well in one market, but they sell well in another market.
Yeah.
Like, and that sort of, it's almost like a little bit of a random factor, and then you might get one country that really loves your books, and they suddenly sell really, really well in that place.
Mm,
And obviously that's one of the things that's been good with my books actually is the ability to be published in lots of other languages, which
yeah,
is really
yeah, of course, of course.
um, because it's sort of, yeah, there's always there's always somebody sort of reading your books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think we're coming to a close to our time, and I would love to hear if you had one piece of advice you would give a young illustrator who's looking to get into the world of picture books. What would your advice be?
Well, after that doom and gloom sort of angle we've just taken a little bit. um,
Is there still hope?
there is still hope. There is still hope. I think one of the things I've always sort of said, and it kind of touches on some of the things we talked about today, but is like regardless of like what's going on in the actual industry, I think it's really
Mm,
important to like not try not to look at what's going on in the industry. But I know that's really difficult not to do that because you just automatically think, oh, and it's important to have context and sort of know what's out there.
yeah.
But I think being true to yourself, like being yourself in your work, putting yourself in your
Mm,
work. Um, and I know that's easier said than done because it's kind of like you can't be kind of like heavy-handedly putting yourself in your work. But like I think it just needs to it needs to resonate with you what it is. I think if you ever find yourself drawing something because you think that's what people want, I feel like that's a bad direction to go in. Um,
yeah.
you just yeah,
I
I
think
think
that's a really good point, though, because I think if you look at the market too closely and try to emulate the trend, by the time you actually do it, you're at the end of the trend, or the trend has already passed. And
Yeah.
so trying to pursue the market that way, I think, takes away from your potential for creating a great story.
Yeah.
Whereas what is super unique about you is your voice. And so
Yeah.
if you can tap into your personality and experience that is unique to you, then I think that book, that story is going to be that much more powerful and unique
Yeah.
in the market, you know?
Yeah. And I think it depends who you can work with as well. Who, like, if you work with a good team, like a good editor, they should be
Mm,
able to kind of encourage and guide that work from you in a way that doesn't control it.
yeah.
I think that's I think sometimes uh especially with like new uh authors or new illustrators
Mm,
or illustrators, they can get, because they're not confident in their own ideas perhaps, or like they're not, confident in what they're doing exactly, then they can get swayed by the editor to do. And this, I don't want to sound like I'm saying editors are bad, but I'm just mean like it's I've been lucky to work with some really good editors who are really good at
mm,
like balancing that. And I
yeah.
think, yeah, if you can end up sort of doing stuff on a project because you hear the voice that is saying, oh, you should do this or try that, it's like, and it can push it into this more sort of commercial area. And you might lose what that quality was that actually like made you draw it in the first place. So
Yes.
you got to know what that is. You got to understand what that is, and sort of and believe in it, and kind of go with that. Not try not to be. I mean, that's not to say that an editor wouldn't have like a good suggestion, or an art director wouldn't have a good suggestion.
Yeah.
But I
I
think perhaps
suppose it's,
possibly back to what you were saying about the industry kind of thing of like, I think
yeah.
there are, or I don't know this for a fact, but I feel there's like an industry pressure sort of to be more commercial in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
A bit like you were saying about perhaps there's less kind of individual voices that are kind of like coming through.
Yeah. I suppose it's like walking the line between confidence and compromise,
Mm,
and finding the space between the two where
mm,
you're confident enough to fight for the thing that makes your story,
mm.
and being willing to compromise so that there is a
Yeah,
level of
like at the right point,
commercialization. Yeah, yeah,
almost at
yeah.
the right point. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, without you sort of, I guess that you put yourself on the line when you say, oh no, I definitely want it to be like this, but obviously
Yes.
you have to feel that that is the right thing, don't you? It can't
Yeah.
just be like a sort of spurious kind of reason why you want to do it. Um, what about yourself? Have you written anything more personal that you've tried to have published, or?
Um, I have. Well, I think so far most of the books I've written that I authored have been quite personal,
Okay.
um, in the sense that they have all been based on conversations I've been having with my kids that then inspire
Hmm.
me to write the book, because I'm like,
Hmm.
why don't we, um, if I'm having this conversation, maybe other parents are too, and
Yeah.
perhaps it could be a useful tool to be a trigger to go into that conversation.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, I've felt like even though I've had books published, it's still a fight to get a new idea in. With
Hmm.
every rendition, it feels like, you know, you're fighting to get your ideas there.
Hmm.
And some of them seem to change quite a lot from
Yeah.
what you had in mind. So,
Yeah.
like I
Which I
said, it's
guess, and
trying.
sometimes an idea does need to change. I suppose,
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's always a bit of a shock though. Sometimes to get these get an email or whatever telling you how it is.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah, yeah,
which often is done gently. So, but it's like,
yeah,
it's like, oh God, it's hard work.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard.
for sure.
It's hard, especially you spill yourself out on the page,
Yes.
and then it feels, this it can be very personal. Like, as in, I don't mean like taking it personally, like that sort of
Yeah,
phrase
yeah,
of taking something personally, but like you personally have sort of, I don't know, often I think it sort of exuded this thing from your soul somehow,
mm,
and uh, and then it's not right, and it's like if
yeah,
it's not right, it's not right, you know.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. Or it's not the right time.
yeah, or it's not the right time. And I think that comes back to like almost this thing of things like, it's the wrong expression, but the sort of expression of like cream rising to the top.
Mm,
So that sort of, I think that filter of things filter through, and there's so many factors that are like controlling the shape of that filter.
mm,
And I often kind of think about that, like in terms of like people who are like, maybe at the top of the game kind of thing. And it's like, there's a reason they are in that place. And it might not be just because they're really good. There's other sort of factors that are kind of controlling, or not. I mean, they are really good, like,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
they do that. But it's like, there's also this thing of like how much they bend their will to the editor,
yeah.
like, or how much they get on with their editor, or like how much or like what type of publishing house it is, or do you know what
How
I mean?
good
There's
their agent is at
who the agent is, and
negotiating.
then other sort of more external factors, like sort of, I guess, sort of cultural factors that are coming in,
Yeah,
and like, or like just like almost like your life experience that gets you
yeah,
to that point. Like, one person might have just had a certain experience that led them to that
mm,
place, and so they ended up there. And it's
yeah,
not like, I don't know, it's not like they're better. They're not a better human. Like, they're just there, aren't they? So,
yeah. Well, like I think this is what I love about talking to other illustrators is all our journeys are similar but completely different in some ways.
mm,
And the circumstances of where we live and the culture we have all play into how our journeys progress. And I think the important takeaway is sort of the need to be consistent and to be passionate about what you're doing. And then as you do, over time, you'll have the compounding effect of things shifting.
mhm.
I I don't know if you've come across Rob Lowe, the artist. He's in London. He was talking about how every 10 years there was an evolution in his career, and that the compounding effect of time, would give these breakthrough moments.
Yeah.
And I can say for myself as well, it was only 10 years into my career before I could become a full-time illustrator and started getting sort of the traction that I was hoping for. But like you said, social media can play this role of almost feeding you the lie that it can happen overnight,
Mhm.
which is counter to reality. I mean, it can for some people, but like
Yeah.
99% of
But
the,
again, that's chance. It's like,
yeah,
I suppose
yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it? It's almost like it is chance,
yeah,
really. Like, as in, it's chance, it's based on someone's experience
yeah,
in their life, but effectively it's chance, right? It's like,
yes,
one, and that's why I say it's like a sort of filter. It's kind of like
yeah,
they just happen to fit through, and the filters that get them into those, into that place. And
yeah, yeah.
they're they're sort of, I don't know, maybe the
Well,
type of
I think you
what
have
their
to,
parents were like. I mean, you sort of said
mm,
about, you were kind of, you know, in a different world. You may not have
yeah,
ended up doing what you're doing if your parents hadn't have been open to that
yeah,
idea.
yeah,
So that's like the first filter you went through was that one.
yeah, yeah. That is not to say that you can't push past despite those filters. You can
Of
still get
course.
to
Yes.
you know.
No, for sure. For sure. And then break through and
Yeah.
make a mark in a different way.
Yeah, but the time frame might vary, as it
Hmm.
were. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that we should all be aware of.
Yeah. 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 Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, this is, whenever I've sort of when I kind of look over like what I've done, it does start kind of from what is now nearly, what is it, like 23 years, through quite dark period to start with.
Yeah.
Trying to find my feet, doing one thing, another thing, living at home, you know, having anxiety, like mental health kind of, because I just couldn't kind of cope with the world and what was going on because it wasn't what I was expecting. I thought I was going to come out of uni and do this thing and then it's really hard and
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And then gradually like picking the way through, like one thing, the next thing, this doesn't work. I've somewhere still got like rejection letters for
Oh yeah.
stuff that I sent to publishers like back in the day, or like all that
Yeah.
stuff. And when you look back, that's over years. Like you can look back at it now and go, oh yeah, and I did that, and that didn't work, and I did that, and that did work, and then you go, I've just kind of plotted out kind of a like you sort of say like 10, 15, 20 year period, and it takes time. It's not it's difficult when you're in it, and
Yeah.
but it's that persistence. You have to you have to persist,
Yes.
and also like realize that I'm saying that in a privileged position as well. Like you know the industry is tries to be more open to more diverse authors and illustrators. And I know that there is a thirst for that, but I think it often also falls back on its sort of, tried and true.
Yeah.
So, um, you know,
Yeah, true. Um, for my last question, I always like to ask this is what does the word fruitful mean to you?
fruitful, fruitful. Um, I think fruitful is like when you're in an abundance, um, when things feel like there's energy there, and I guess it's it's not so hard, I reckon,
Mm,
and things are when things come easily. So maybe those times of like when inspiration strikes
yeah.
and feel like suddenly, you know, to extend the metaphor, I happen to be staring at an apple tree right now. I'm out the window. So, when it's the winter and it's the sort of the bare trees, it can be quite hard, can't it? But then, suddenly the blossoms come and eventually the fruit.
Yeah.
So I think that sums up our conversation because it touches on the idea of, things kind of coming from these little seeds and growing. I mean, that's what I often think with ideas. It's like
Yeah.
sow the seeds, and you could say that about if someone wants to be, getting into illustration and writing. It's that sort of, you have to sow those seeds to start with to get to that, to one day to get to the fruit.
Yeah. 100%. This has been brilliant. Hey. And hey, thank you all for listening to this episode of The Fruitful Life. I hope you walked away with some nuggets of wisdom. If you did, please do me a favor and leave a rating and a comment to tell me what you think of the show. Also, consider telling a friend that might enjoy it. As always, be true, be you, stay fruitful.